Hi, I'm Jim Brett, President and CEO of the New England Council. Thanks for tuning in to this month's episode of Inside the Corner Office, where we catch up with the leaders of some of our region's most well-respected businesses and organizations to learn more about their career paths and about the institutions they lead. This month, I am thrilled to be joined by an incredible young leader here in Boston, who I've had the pleasure to know for many, many years, and that is Alexis Steel, the president of St. Mary's Center for Women and Children. As you'll hear from Alexis, St. Mary's Center is an incredible organization that empowers families to achieve emotional stability and economic independence through a variety of services. We'll also learn more about some exciting plans for the center's growth in the years ahead. Alexis, great to be here with you at St. Mary's Center. Thanks so much for welcoming me and taking the time to share more about your incredible work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We always start these conversations learning a little more about our guests and what drives them. So let's start there. We've been here with St. Mary's Center since almost 8 years. 2020, you became the president. Talk more about how you came to St. Mary's and your role there prior to becoming the president.
Absolutely. So I think my story is a little bit different than I think typical of coming into this field, but it was always my passion to work with women and children. Since I was a very small child, my parents were very involved in the community and different projects. And since I was around 7 or 8, I told my parents that I was moving to Africa and I was going to work with kids. And that was always the dream. And I never really thought I would work domestic in my career. I always thought I would work international. I always thought I would work with women and children. And so I did that for multiple years, almost a decade, before I came to St. Mary's Center. And why I chose a different path versus working international within these communities was, I remember my final trip to India. I worked in India and Uganda, and I worked as leading global operations for global health, reproductive, maternal, newborn child health initiatives. And I remember my final trip to India, I had to fly there for 1 hour, for a 1 hour meeting.
Wow.
I was there for 32 hours, and then I flew home. And at the end of my trip, I said, this can't be it. And it was because, although we did really, really incredible work when I was at Mass General for a startup there called Camtech at the time, although I really worked within communities across India and mostly in one place in Uganda, but across India, as I climbed the ladder, I got less and less direct impact with families and with those that I was really working to serve. And so I realized that the more I climbed within my field, the less direct engagement I was going to have. And it's not even about impact on families, it's impact on me, right? I think it's truly about wanting to spend my time working within the community that I want to serve. And so I really, the day that I decided I was going to look, this position was open. And at that time, it was the Senior Vice President of Operations and Compliance. It was a newly appointed role that was created by the Board of Trustees at St. Mary's Center. And it was really working towards strategy and operations. And I managed operations. And so at that time, I had known a few folks from St. Mary's Center when I ran a small, for a short amount of time when we were at Camtech, we did a local initiative focused on the opioid epidemic at that time. We partnered with GE Foundation as part of their moving to Boston. And so I had met a few folks within this field, and I had reached out and interviewed with the Board of Trustees and then moved in. Unbeknownst at that time, I didn't know that in 14 months later, I was going to be asked to take on interim and then move into the role permanently of CEO. But it was such although I struggled with making that decision to leave international, it has meant so much to me that I get to walk outside my door of where I work every day and get to engage with families. And I think at my level, that's
What was
hard.
it like becoming the president in 2020 and facing COVID?
So I was asked to take on interim in November 2019, so right before COVID. I knew that it was going to be a challenging start as we had a few different things going on. We needed to do a strategic plan and all of these things, and then 3 months in, the world as we know it ended. COVID was a very interesting time. I can say that we did not have any massive infection rates here, and that was due to our incredible team and the safety precautions that we put in place. We really led with other providers. In the state, we created a continuity of operations plan, and we stuck to it. And our team was incredibly supportive. I think the hardest part was watching families get even more alienated, right? They already feel alienated, moving from what they were coming from and their network and their community, and so many of them fleeing situations. And then they land in a shelter, which already feels alienating. They're sharing space with 100 other people. And then we told them, you can't leave that space because it's COVID. And I think that was the most difficult part, is just seeing the impact on children and women who were really struggling.
What got your passion going about women and children? I mean, you talked a little bit about your mother and father. They were involved in the community, but you seem to have a real passion. Is that something that developed over the years, or you had it at 7 or 8 years old?
Yeah, my father likes to say that there was a pathway in my head that only I could see.
Wow.
I really think it was just instilled from a very young age. I was a charter school kid, and so growing up, it was the expectation within my family, within my community, as well as my upbringing and the school that my parents chose, that you invest in your community. And I think my parents both had challenging growing up in very different ways, and they really dedicated their whole life to making sure that my sisters and I had the dream that they always wanted for us. And so I think growing up with that really intense family and community, for me, I was always naturally drawn to children. I am from a family of extremely strong women that really are leaders in many ways, in all different ways. And so then growing up and seeing at a very young age, okay, well, in these other communities, children are not as dedicated to, and women do not have those same opportunities, pushed me to want to work in that space, that women and children should have all of those opportunities, and that should be the same everywhere. And I want to work in communities that will develop and dedicate those resources to that.
You know, for those that are tuning in and learning a little bit more about the St. Mary's Center here, talk about your organization here and the services that you provide.
Yeah, so St. Mary's Center for Women and Children, we were established in 1993. It was actually, talk about community, John M. Corcoran really saw this space when St. Margaret's Hospital closed. He saw this space as a resource for the community, in particular young moms and children. As a maternity hospital, we were really focused, I say we, St. Margaret's Hospital was really focused on those first days of life. Yep. But what makes St. Mary's Center special is that we were born out of the idea that it's not about the first days of life, it's about creating future stability and multi-generational stability and growth. And so us focusing on that, we do that through a series of programs. We really pride ourselves in this story of positive movement. And so how do we build opportunities for our families in education, in employment, in housing stability, in developing life skills that many of our folks struggling for multi-generations maybe didn't get those same resources. They didn't get that upbringing that I'm so privileged to have with my family. And so how do we really work with our families to offer these opportunities and build future generations of stability and break down multi-generational homelessness and trauma? And so we do that through a young pregnant parenting teen mom program, supporting young mothers from the ages of 13 to 22. We have an adult family shelter program supporting moms with children. We have a transitional housing program, which is really focused on that next step of how do we support those young moms exiting out of the DCF system and exiting out of young parenthood to parenthood, and how do we have them really continue to learn and grow while having the safety net of St. Mary's Center. And we do that through offering really our core 4 pillars of support: education, employment, life skills, housing, behavioral health.
Wow. And prior to 1993, you just mentioned this was St. Margaret's Hospital. We had some notable Bostonians that were born here. Senator Ted Kennedy, Mark Wahlberg, and our own popular,
Marty Walsh.
very popular Marty Walsh.
Yeah.
It's a rich history.
Very good friends. Very good friends.
It's a rich history. And can you just talk about the plans that you have for the future, in the years to come? And I was proud to join you and many other dignitaries in the kickoff this past year. But talk about your ideas and where you're going to go here in the future.
Yeah. So first, thank you. You've been an incredible supporter since the beginning, as have our legislators. Marty Walsh, although he's still not our mayor, he'll always be our mayor in one way, has been incredibly supportive. Mayor Wu, Governor Healy, Representative Hunt, City Councilor John Fitzgerald. I mean, everyone has just been really fantastic in the support of our project. The capital project that we're doing, this was a renovated, retrofitted maternity hospital that we grew over time to support our community needs. And so what we are excited to do at this point is that model of positive movement, that model of moving families from shelter to their own independent apartments on our campus while we continue to work with them and support them before they move on to independent housing. We want to replicate that model for all of our families. And so what we are doing as part of our project, we launched it, it's called, it's our capital campaign, and it's transforming lives all in one place. And its focus is around phase one is focused on building permanent supportive housing units, so building supportive housing with services for our adult families moving out of shelter. That will be doubling our impact, so doubling the amount of families that we can serve each year. And then phase 2 will be focused on a gut renovation, really creating dignified spaces for our families. Moving from maternity hospital rooms that was meant for a mom and a newborn for a couple days to really creating spaces that are green spaces for our families to play, education and learning centers, behavioral health rooms, really focused on those dignified spaces for our families. And so it's been a really incredible process. We launched this as part of our strategic plan when I moved into this role in 2020. And so to have the capital launch that you so incredibly spoke at a few months ago has been amazing, the progress.
And that campaign goal is to what, raise 30 million?
Yeah. 30 million. The entire project's about 110 million. We've received incredible public support. About 56 million.
Right.
And so we're about 30% down of our 30 million goal, and we'll be spending the next 2 years raising an additional about 20 million.
You know, you said that all these wonderful things you do for these women to prepare them for, housing, whether it's financial, education, employment. But where's the housing? I mean, what is that like? Once they're established, that they can build that, they have the foundation there, but where's the housing for them? Where do they go?
Yeah. Right now it's a challenge. I mean, families are moving to Fitchburg, Springfield, Worcester, and the reality of that is most of their network is here. And we know how this is in Massachusetts. If you don't have a car in a lot of those communities, you really can't get anywhere. We also have a number of families who have serious medical concerns. In the last year, we've had 4 families with cancer, 2 of which have passed away. 2 members of families in our shelter have passed away, so they need to be close to the best hospitals, right? And so it's been a huge challenge moving people out where we are not disconnecting them further and where we can continue to support them. And so with our project of being able to focus on affordable housing with our wraparound support services here, we are proud that we're able to participate in the housing goals of our state of really establishing affordable housing. Because as of right now, I know our focus has been on, I think as a community overall, it's push for housing, but we're not focused on sustainable housing. We're not focused on the ability to bring affordable housing that our families can really thrive in. And so as a whole, I think that needs to be our focus, and I'm grateful that that our legislators and our supporters for our project have really understood that about our model, as that's the push.
Do you have some families doubling up an apartment?
And tripling.
And tripling? I mean, talk about that. What's that like? Wow.
Yeah, I think, so as an example, I was called by a legislator not this past weekend, the weekend before. A mom needed to move into a unit with 2 other families just to be able to afford the rent. The rent is $5,000 a month. That would be difficult for any of us to afford,
yeah, sure.
right? And we have to remember that 90% of families experiencing homelessness are single mothers with children. And if you have a child with medical needs, that removes you from being able to work full time. If you can't get into daycare, that removes you from being able to work full time. And so how else do you survive? And you survive by co-locating, which can be challenging. In that case, 2 of the families did not decide to stay at the apartment. And there was one mom who's 23 weeks pregnant with a 4-year-old that's trying to figure out how to pay $5,000 for a rent. And it's a challenge. So again, with the push of affordable housing, I cannot say it longer. I think that will impact, say it more, I think that will impact communities in the best way of being able to provide sustainable, affordable housing for families.
You know, last summer, the St. Mary's Center was one of 6 organizations that the New England Council inaugurated, and the New England Council Fellows as part of our 100th anniversary. And you had the opportunity to have a student from Holy Cross, Dan, talk about, one, the difference he made in that position, and what was it like for you to supervise a fellow?
Yeah, well, we're very, very grateful for that opportunity.
Right.
I remember when we had seen it, and we were asked by a board member of the New England Council, you know, would there be a need? I'm like, yeah, there's a need. There's never enough time or resources. And when I was asked, I think you had asked me, who would have done this work that the fellow did?
Yes.
If I did, I said me, and it would have been on nights and weekends because that would be the only time to do it, right? We had Dan Hackett, who I could not speak more highly about. He's incredible, and what he did for us during the summer, we've actually continued. We found some funds to actually continue his work with us.
Oh, great.
Because he was so incredible.
Yeah,
I have calls with him every other Thursday from school. He's working remotely from Holy Cross.
Okay.
But what he did with us was he actually did an in-depth analysis of our families moving out of shelter. And what did it look like when they came into St. Mary's Center? What support did they have? What was their lasting impact? And what else do they need after leaving us? It's something that we've tracked very high level before, but with changes in policy, it was not something that we were able to track real time without this fellow. And so him bringing in an analysis of these are different communities that are more affordable, this is the tracking trend of how many families experience domestic violence, and that's why they're here, so they need additional services for behavioral health. Or this is how many referrals we had to make for these families in this program for financial literacy, right? He was able to track all of that real time for us. And I can say, supporting him, I've been able to support one really fantastic intern who was assigned to us from State Street a couple years ago, and this fellow. I'm very lucky. We have hired both after their internships.
Wow. Yeah, good.
And I can say that supporting Dan and was incredible.
Do you think something like an experience for Dan opening his eyes to what you do here daily might be a career path that he says, I never thought of maybe this type of work, but now that I've been exposed to it, this may be something I might want to spend some years postgraduate. So
Absolutely.
would it be? Yeah.
Yeah, so he said when he came in, he said that he had two very conflicting views. Like, does he go into business or does he do, his mother works, I don't want to misquote, but his mother works with immigration attorney, and she works with our population, or she's worked with our population before.
Sure.
And so I think him coming in, he's had a number of corporate internships before he had this.
Yeah.
And so I said at the end of his internship, I hope I brought you over to the light side.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you gotta come over here.
Yeah, right.
So I think he is really passionate. He's looking at going into law, but what the nerdy side of me also loves data. And so that was one takeaway that he said at the end of his internship as well, is that he actually really enjoys the data analysis piece, and he'd be very interested in exploring that further as part of his career, especially when it comes to policy, which if I can turn any person onto data and data tracking, I'm all for it.
Good. You know, we're hearing from a wide array of human service providers in particular about the federal cuts and how it's impacting, whether it's the federal cuts or actually cuts in programs. What are you seeing here?
Families struggle. Family struggle. I can say that on St. Mary's Center end, we don't get federal funding for our operations. We would have if our strategic
Your
plan.
funding is state, city, and private?
A little bit of city, mostly state and private. So right now we're about a 75-25 split. Next year, with some of the changes, we're probably going to be a little bit more like 60-40, 60% public state, 40% fundraised, as our typical operations, just due to the new reprocurement process. But on our end, we're seeing the direct impact to our families. So families being denied food benefits.
The SNAP.
SNAP, right? Or WIC, being able to not afford milk. We're seeing families, of course, in terms of just being afraid, and how do we support them in that? How do we support them and their families and their network and how they're impacted? I can say that in terms of policy changes, seeing families it feels like we just don't have enough time to support them. The roads to stability, particularly in multi-generational families that have really struggled, it's long. It's a tough, hard hill to climb. Definitely, the road can be long, and so seeing families need to leave before we can really help them feel that they're stable has been challenging. I think.
What is the average stay of a family here?
So for our adult families currently with the state policy is 6 to 8 months. For our young parents, they can be with us longer because they age out at 22. It's the DCF system. So sometimes our families can be with us for 2 years in our young parenting. We have one particular mom who came in at 16. She's leaving us at 19. So it depends on what the age they come in there. But typical, I would say our sweet spot is probably a year for any of our families.
You know, I know that here in Massachusetts, St. Mary's Center has a great relationship with government officials. You mentioned with Governor Healy. She was here. She spoke, glowingly of the work that you're doing here. You mentioned the elected representatives, Representative Dan Hunt and City Councilor John Fitzgerald.
Senator Collins,
State Senator Nick Collins. Talk about that relationship and how important it is for you here to have those advocates for you in the city and in the state.
Yeah. So in terms of state, I can say that our biggest supporter for what we do is Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities under Governor Healy, Lieutenant Gov, and Secretary Augustus. With it, I think the Executive Office, EOHLC, I think they've had some challenging times with the crisis of family homelessness, right? We're seeing that across many states. I serve as a treasurer and originally as a steering committee member for the National Women's Shelter Network. And on that too, we're seeing that in a lot of states, right? States really struggling with that. But I can say that in terms of our relationship with them, they are incredibly, incredibly supportive, particularly of when we have some new ideas of how to kind of pivot our model or how do we support families. But in terms of our capital project, they've been incredibly helpful. We've received 50 plus million from the state for funding for this project. This project quite literally could not exist without
the state support.
it, and absolutely. And in terms of our legislators, I cannot speak more highly of the legislators that St. Mary's Center has, and our at-large committee members as well.
Right.
Ruth C., City Councilor at Large, Erin Murphy. I mean, everyone has been incredibly supportive of our families, of our mission. I can confidently say that any single time I've called Representative Hunt, I know he joked of this at our Capitol launch, but anytime I've ever needed to reach out to City Councilor Fitzgerald or Representative Hunt, it's resolved, it's handled with compassion, because I think we're here to do good work. You can only do good work together, and as a person who came from working in global health, I know firsthand our work only moves forward with public-private partnership, and we all need each other to be able to do the work we do. That's how I feel with the EOHLC. I know that's how they feel about us, the folks that we work with there. That's how I feel with the governor, and I think our mission is supporting women and children. Governor Healy's speech at our Capitol launch around just being raised in a house with a single parent, right? Our mission speaks to everybody of what does this mean? What does it mean for you and your family? And think back to the support you had or didn't have, and what would your life look like if you didn't have that, right? And so us being able to do the work we do, it is truly in partnership.
I think it's a great example for other non-profit human service agencies to study how you have such a great relationship with all the elected officials. And it's made a difference, obviously, you say, but you really work it, and to show that it's a public-private. I mean, there isn't any elected official on the horizon that could be of importance to you that you haven't met and convinced them to come here, and once they come here, they buy in, because how can they not? But it's really extraordinary what you have done.
Thank you.
Developing that relationship.
Thank you.
And it's something to be
No,
commended.
we're grateful. Our East Boston delegation has also been just so incredible. I mean, they're not part of our capital project here, but when we've worked with Representative Matero, again, he's just been. We're very lucky to have the support that we do so publicly for the work we do, and again, I couldn't speak more highly of them. So I'm happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, you should be proud. Now, one of the my closing question, which is the softball, for those listening today to this program who are interested in supporting you in the incredible work that you and your team does every day here, how can they help? Whether it's financial or operational, what's the advice? What's the suggestion? What's the big ask of these people? Because you need lots of help.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say threefold. One, I'll put my CEO and fundraiser hat on. Always financial, right? So St. Mary's Center, stmarycenter.ma.org. Please reach out. Please see how you can help. Always reach out to me, Alexis Steel. And in terms of our capital goal, again, we're raising $20 million on top of our regular $2 to $3 million a year to operate. And it really, again, with that public-private partnership, we all have to work together to make sure the mission continues. I would say in terms of giving time or giving goods, we always accept in-kind donations. Bed in a bag. We create welcome kits for our families. We create moving gifts for our families. We celebrate every holiday for our family. And so if you ever want to donate time or engage with us, we're always happy. We're protective of our families in so many ways, just because of so many struggling, but there's always ways to support there. And then third, I, in my advocacy hat, is advocate for those that are most vulnerable. And those that are most vulnerable in our communities are certainly women and children, particularly communities of color are vulnerable right now. And our Jones Hill Association community has been so wonderfully refreshing and great to work with, of folks really standing up and standing by us.
Especially with the expansion that you're doing here.
I mean,
they could
yes,
have
in my
blocked it, they could have
backyard.
said, not,
Absolutely.
it's great work you're doing, but no more expansion here.
Absolutely.
But here they are saying,
And they're standing up with us.
well, I think it says something about your leadership
How can
and who
we
you
help?
are.
How can we engage?
Right.
They were supportive.
Yeah.
They had to, listen to me for a year in community
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, no, I know.
I mean, I think so. And a third way to support is always help advocate for those that are most vulnerable and those that do not have the same privilege that you do. And I'm very grateful that I get to be surrounded by folks that support that.
Well, again, I want to thank Alexis for joining me today and to learn more about the extraordinary work that you and your team does each and every day here. So I just want to thank you and continued success in all that you do here. And for those of you tuning in, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Also learn more about the wonderful work at St. Mary's Center for Women and Children. For those who tune in next month, when our guest will be Ilya Yufa, who is the president of Lilly USA.